picture a druid, what do you see? An old man in a robe chanting under a tree, sacrificing a Christian to the sounds of a drummer, like the weird nature cult from the movie Midsummer?
Or do you imagine a wizard in green with wild nature magic and uncertain hygiene, wearing antlers, a staff, and a surplus of hair, calling out to the beasts, turning into a bear?
Real druids were leaders of old Gaulish tribes and Celtic language cultures, according to scribes. The records we have are from old Roman writings, or Christians long after the last Druid sightings. So as sources go, these aren't terribly great. They're either from enemies or centuries late.
We don't think that they worship the plants and the beasts. Hell, we aren't even certain that Druids were priests. We can guess at beliefs using science and logic, with items we found at sites archaeologic. Take, for example, the horned Cernunnos, a god some neo-Druids might mention the most. His name's only found on one pillar in France, just a name and an antlered guy not wearing pants.
From his antlers hang torques, ancient men's jewelry, but the pillar is weathered and quite hard to see. It's a pillar of gods, some Roman, some new, so it's probably safe to assume he is too.
Then, from Denmark, who also had old Celtic peoples, long before Vikings or tall Christian steeples, came another great find for us history dorks, of a dude with some antlers, also wearing 2 torques. We can probably assume that this god is the same, but unlike the pillar, this art has no name. The Gundrop cauldron from Denmark, you see, comes from sometime around the 1st century BC. It shows this god sitting in lotus position, surrounded by beasts in a grand coalition.
Perhaps he's the god of the beasts and the bears, or a bringer of wealth from the torques that he wears. But sadly, we folklorists have to confess that that's all that we know and the most we can guess.
But read about him in a New Age bookshop, and you'll get a mountain of thick folklore slop. They'll say he was patron of this or of that, pulling mythology out of their hat.
Please believe what you want. The gods are a mystery. Just don't call it ancient, and don't call it history.
Now, to whittle a 1,000-year-long story short, the Gauls fought the Romans and their cohorts. Since the founding of Rome, their conflict was fated, but then Gaul was conquered and assimilated.
So one hint that we have of old Celtic beliefs comes from old Roman ruins and stony reliefs. See, the Romans, they said, our gods are the same. You worship Apollo just by a new name. So take, for example, the goddess shown here. This is Sulis, her temple still standing this year. Her old Roman baths with waters divine were likely an old Celtic watery shrine.
So we can make guesses about Sulis of Bath based on how she was worshipped in the Celts' aftermath. Sulis Minerva, say these ancient antiques. Minerva's the Roman, that's Athena to Greeks. Because Sulis was linked to Minerva before, maybe Sulis was wisdom.
Or owls.
Or war.
Now, there are no writings from Druidish sources, but we can get some knowledge from opposing forces. So let's turn to our classical history shelf. Our first source on Druids was Caesar himself.
Now that is like taking a course on the Sioux from General Custer, but it's the best we can do. Caesar said that Druids were priests of the Gaulish, a group that the Romans would later abolish. His writings and others from Romans we know, like Pliny and Strabo and old Cicero, are where we get tales of human sacrifice, being burned in an effigy not very nice.
Or the idea that Druids were banned from all writing. Were those stories true, or did they just sound exciting?
Were the forest shrines real, or just to keep Romans thrilled? Or were they places the Gauls wouldn't be found in unalived? Mistletoe, oak, these might be true or not. They were written by Romans, but they're the best that we've got.
After Roman depictions of violence and evil come our next source on Druids, the Irish medieval. In Irish and Latin, the stories unfurled, when monks wrote down myths from the pre-Christian world.
Now, the Latin works talk about the life of a saint, and they rendered the Druids in not-so-nice paint. In St. Patrick, for instance, they're spiteful and odd.
In St. Bridget's, they desperately need Catholic God.
But books written in Irish were largely more fair, depicting Druids' role in society there. They're still written far later, and they might be a trap, but let's look where Caesar and these monks overlap.
Both talk of a learned class broken in three, with three types of wise folks the old Celts might be. As you can see, the divide was quite fluid. There's bards, prophet poets, and finally the Druid.
Bards kept the stories, the oral traditions, entertaining and praising with magic renditions. They are also depicted as laying down curses, supernatural satire woven in verses.
The poets composed and they also satired, gave advice to the king as much as required. They were teachers and scholars more than entertainers. They were also soothsayers and portent explainers.
Druids also advised royals in their vocations, and they also gave prophecies and proclamations, and they were also scholars who tutored and taught. But the Druids had skills that no other group brought. Out of all these three groups in that pre-Christian hour, the Druids would wield most political power. They were well-versed in warcraft, advising for battle, arbitrated disputes, most involving cattle. They read portents to show who was fit to be king. That type of magic was really their thing. Other magical skills were uniquely their own, and there's lots of great tales where their power is shown.
Bird feather cloaks seem to be Druid norms. One dressed as a raven and conjured up storms, but shapeshifting magic's their most common spell, cast on themselves or on others as well. In the great epic, they turn into deer to escape from pursuers who'd gotten too near. The Black Druid, a villain from tales we know, used the same spell on Sava, cursing her as a doe.
A kingly advisor with magic and wit. Remind you of someone else in medieval lit?
And there we can witness the Druids' transition from figures of history to mythic tradition. But they weren't the last ones to honor the name. Many latter-day folks bore the Druidic flame. In the 1700s, as Great Britain grew, they had conquered their island, and Ireland too. They needed a figure each nation could heed, and since they all had Druids, it satisfied the need.
This is also where we start to see Druids erroneously linked to Stonehenge. Sorry for breaking your flow with the rhymes. Stonehenge predates the Druids by thousands of years, and there's no record of it having any significance to them. But as always, faith is faith, and you may practice however you like. Back to you, Pooka.
But the Victorians acted contrarian, depicting the Druid as a violent barbarian. They saw them as savage, with blood and with fire, and empathizing, of course, with the colonizing empire.
There's a wonderful lecture from old Gresham College, which we would be jerks if we did not acknowledge. Professor Ronald Hutton talks Druidic times, which we're now going to paraphrase here with some rhymes. It's a great in-depth lecture with valuable quotes. We aren't affiliated, but there's a link in our notes.
According to Hutton, there are 8 different stripes of Druids in their latter-day archetypes. These archetypes cover a wide, sweeping range. Each comes and goes as a cultural change.
There's the demonic Druid that's really not fair. Then there's the green Druid who's eco-aware. The neo-pagan Druid, an attempt to rekindle. Or the nationalist Druid, a patriot symbol. We won't cover them all, but it's fine to observe what folks saw in the Druids and the purpose they'd serve.
So that's what we know about the Druids of old. Don't believe all the folklore you might have been told.
You can comment if you thought our points weren't sound.
But if you thought it was helpful, then share it around.
What topic is next for these shape-shifting fae? Only the Pooka and their patrons can say.
Unless we're lying.
In all the old tales, it's wise to make friends. Helping out someone small always pays dividends.
A broken-winged bird, an innocent toad, that old vagabond by the side of the road.
Now we Pooka have eons of knowledge to bring, but we're still pretty new to this whole YouTube thing.
So we've got a Patreon as of this week. If you want to support, click the link, take a peek.
We need your help. If you like the show's vibe and you want to see more, click that link and subscribe.
Prove you're a real mythology lover.
Vote on what topics you want us to cover.
Paid members get shoutouts in one of our shows. Please make that part harder as our channel grows.
Our patrons rule as our fandom's apexes, and this month we've got 2 lovely Alexes. Alexandra H. and Alexander N. We love your support, so thank you again.
If this was a video that you enjoyed,
And click on subscribe. Keep a Pooka employed.
He's a puca.
A puca? Is that something new?
No, as I understand it, that's something very old.
You don't know about Pooka? Why, that is insane!
watch our first video where we explain.